Okay, so here we are in Microsoft Flight Simulator at the Macasims add-on Manchester Airport in the UK to look at a new release that came out today, and that's from Captain Sim, and it is their Boeing 777-200ER, which is available from their website for $29.95. That's dollars, which is about a little bit over 20 quid, or roughly sort of 20 euros. And let's see what we think of it. It's well, let's get into it and we'll see, shall we? Now, straight off the bat, you can see that, it appears to be quite a nice model. However, things are not what they seem. Can you, for example, notice that the jet bridge is not at the right height, and it's not contacting the aircraft properly? And it would be contacting the aircraft properly and to be at the right height if in this 777's place was a Boeing 747, and that kind of gives you a clue as to what's going on with this thing. And we'll have a look inside just to make that really apparent. Now I'm going to get the battery on there, like that, and what that will enable me to do is that will enable me to get rid of the jetway. Now, you can see what appears to be quite a nice Boeing 777 cockpit. Until you have a look here and you find that what you've got is the default Boeing 747 Avionics. Now, you might think that that doesn't matter that much, and you'd be kind of right in some ways, but we'll see that it causes some problems, not insurmountable problems, but we'll see as this review progresses. So I'll give you an example of one of them. If we look up on the FS panel here, you can see the range adjuster here, and you'll see that it's on 10 because this is a 777 FS panel. But if you look on the PFD down here, the range is down to 0.25 of a mile. So when we take that up on here to range 20, we get range 1 mile. And then if we, sorry, my view going bonkers there. And then if we take that out to 40, you can see we're at 5 miles there. And if we change that to 80, we're out to 10 miles. And if we change that to 160, we're at 40 miles. So what that tells you is that this can indeed adjust the range of one of the flight displays, but not to the scale that it's calibrated to on a 747, when it's got the scale that's calibrated to what a 777 does. Other than that, this does work, but as we'll see, there are other problems as well. Now, so what I'm going to do anyway is I'm going to start the APU just to get us going like that. So there's the APU cranking up, and that will reveal another problem to us. So the APU is starting up, and you can see another problem because this thing lights up in the middle, and you can see 1 engine, 2 engine, 3 engine, 4 engines. Now, I am not the world's expert on the Boeing 777, however, even I know that thing's only got 2 engines. So this is just lazy, man. Yeah, fine. Do a Bredoc 3D and use the avionics from the Airbus A320 to make your 737, and use some of the switches and stuff like that. But at least the A320 and the 737 have both got 2 engines. This thing's got a display for 4 engines when it's got 2 engines. Now it still works, yeah. What you end up with is that display working for engine 1 and that display working for engine 2, and the other 2 just don't light up. And all of the controls kind of work anyway, but I mean, come on, it's a bit of artwork. You know, it really wouldn't have taken them that long to sort it out. Now, hopefully they will sort it out, or some third-party person will sort it out, but that is just lazy, man. I mean, you know, I've knocked out some ropey artwork in the past when I've been pushed for time sometimes, when I've worked as a graphic artist, but I don't think I ever took the piss that badly. So yeah, that's pretty poor. I mean, to be fair, this is 20 quid, but come on, man, you know what I mean? It's like, you couldn't knock up a bit of artwork and do a couple of animations on it, really? You know what I mean? Anyway, let's take a look at look at what functions now. But just before we carry on with the inside, so you saw there that because it's based on a 747, the jet bridge doesn't make an accurate correct connection. It doesn't make it to the fuselage, and it doesn't make it at the right height either. But it doesn't continue there. Normally, if you've bought Captain Sim stuff in the past, yeah, you can be critical of some things on them. Excuse me. But one thing that you could never be critical with on Captain Sim stuff was externally, the visual models were fantastic. I mean, you usually get a 2D panel, pop-up panel in FSX and P3D where you could click on things and you could literally open every panel on the thing. You know, the radome had open, the engine cowlings had open, and all this kind of stuff. This thing, nothing. Not a single thing opens. You can call for the bags to come, and the baggage elevator will go up to your plane. No doors open. You can call for the catering truck. No doors open. The door wasn't open when the jet bridge came up. You know, no animations whatsoever. So that is lazy. Now, when I say no animations, don't worry. The control surfaces, you can see the elevators are still moving there, and the ailerons move, and the flaps deploy, and the engines fans spin round, and the wheels turn, and all that kind of stuff. So I'm not talking about no animations in that respect, but what I'm talking about is no animations in terms of panels opening and all that kind of stuff. You do get this thing, which is the Captain Sim aircraft configuration editor, and this will allow you to download and install liveries. You don't have to do anything. You can do it all via this interface. That is cool. By default, when you install this, you just get this default livery, but when you crank this thing up, you can download liveries and it will install them for you. And this will also let you, as you can see, change the configuration of the aerial. So if you wanted to model a specific 777-200ER that has certain antennas on it and not other antennas on a specific paint job, you can do that. So that's good, you know. So if they can do that, then surely they can animate some doors opening, or at least, you know, do a panel with the right amount of engines on it and what have you. So what we're looking at here is, yes, it's 20 quid, but it's 20 quid because they've been a bit sloppy with stuff on this. Anyway, to continue. Right, so what works and what doesn't work. Now, bizarrely, there are some nice animations on it. So we've got this thing here, you know, you can click on that. Bit pointless, but, you know, it's okay that it does it, and you got that thing there that animates there, and that same thing occurs on the other side, you know, so you can get the little sort of drinks tray down, and you can get the the thing appearing there. Excuse me if I keep coughing. A drink went down the wrong way earlier on, and I keep sort of coughing. I managed to pour a cup of tea the wrong way down my throat. So we've got paper show there, like that, where you can have an approach chart on there, and you can hide that, and then you can, if you want to, I think if we click that, yog visibility, which if you click here, that comes back. So that's kind of useful because it gets in the way of the CDU a little bit. Now, there's the tiller. You can't click on it to move it, but it does move when you move the wheels. You know, when we do the push back, you'll see that thing does actually move. So that is actually animated. Don't get excited about this EFB because it does nothing. Doesn't even have a dummy page on it or anything like that. And the same's true on the other side. Window handle doesn't open. This thing here, for the increasing the brightness and stuff like that of the floodlight, does work. Yeah, the heater switch there, you know, well, not that would really matter. Doesn't work, but these things do with the lights and stuff like that. That stuff doesn't work. The chronometer doesn't work on it, and I think that's a really bad omission. because, you know, like I use the chronometer a lot when you're doing IFR stuff, and I think it's a bit sloppy that it doesn't actually work. If we do this, if you look on the yoke here, you'll see that is actually affecting it. You'll probably be able to see the brightness reflections changing on the yoke. So we've got that going on there, and we've got that with these lights here. And what I will do is I will change the time to night time in a moment, and you'll be able to see the night lighting on the thing, which is actually not bad. So if we get some of this lighting up like that, like the dome light and the overhead stuff and these things, and what we'll do is we'll go to the external view as well when we do this. So I'll get all the exterior lights on as well. Not that you should when you understand, but you know, dazzle your rampies and all that kind of stuff. But if we change it to nighttime, visually it's not bad. That's quite nice, that, isn't it? Don't you think? You know, so it's not all terrible news. I mean, you know, if you like flying your planes at night, that's actually quite a sort of cozy looking cockpit. And as I say, a lot of the lights are adjustable. You can see that. So they've done that quite nice. And when we go outside as well, you can see that the lighting outside is good. Strobes and all that kind of stuff's pretty good. Could be a bit brighter, but you know, not terrible. So that's all right. Now back in the cockpit. I do think it's bad that the clock doesn't work. You know, that's useful for your airliner simulations and stuff like that. Because obviously, you know, when you push out, you start your chronograph and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Notice those things don't work. The two flight displays work. All of that stuff on the FS works. Although, as we've seen, you know, it doesn't necessarily tally with what's on the display particularly well. But, you know, like you can have terrain on there and all that kind of stuff. None of that works. Master caution switch does work, as we can see there. Standby artificial horizon works. Gear lever works. Auto brake lever works, or control works. These things for sort of switching the displays don't work, as they don't work there. All of that stuff on the main Autopilot works, and it works with an exterior SATEC Logitech Autopilot panel, like the one that I've got with the flap lever and the trim wheel and all that kind of stuff. If you've got one of those, this works with it, and you can do all the LNAV and VNAV with it, so that's cool. The FS works on the other side as well, so it's not just functional on one side, so all of this stuff works. We've seen that some of those switches work, some of them don't. The PFDs on the other side work. That CDU works, that CDU works, and that CDU works, but they are all slaved together. So if you change the display on that one, they all change. You can't have one displaying one thing and one displaying another thing. It doesn't work. It's like they're all on the same thing. Flap lever works, throttle lever works, speed brake lever works, fuel cut-off levers work, and what have you. When you tweak the trim, you're not really getting much of an indication of movement, but it does work when it's in the air. I was moving the trim wheel on my my hardware thing. You can't move the seat armrest out of the way, which is a bit annoying, because I would rather have the seat armrest move out of the way than an animated drinks tray that you can't actually put a drink on. I would prefer to be able to get this thing out of the way. Down here, the transponder can be adjusted. So, you know, if you want to fly this on VATSIM, you can. And the traffic collision alert, TCAS, and all that kind of stuff works. The radio stuff works, nav and com. The rudder trim works, but, you know, all the other stuff that's kind of down here doesn't really do a hell of a lot. So you can see that we've got things like the floodlights on there, panel lighting. You can increase the brightness of it. So the lighting's good on it. And most of the things that you would want to work or need to work to be able to do an IFR flight do actually work. But all the kind of other switches that would be working in a study sim plane that you're not necessarily going to use that much don't actually function. So, you know, like a lot of this stuff there. None of that working back there. What is interesting is, boom, if you open the door, you can see the cabin, and it is fully modelled. The entire cabin, first class section, cattle class section, the galleys and all that kind of stuff. So if you like your wing views and stuff like that, that is really, really well modelled. Looks pretty good. So we can see across here, I'd say 60 to 75% of the switches work. The CDU will get to it in a minute. You know, the vast majority of things that you'd want to work on it do work. As you can see, I've got managed to get the APU going on there, and now what I'm going to do is, even though we're on the stand, I'm going to start one of the engines because I'll do a manual start. So here we go. I'll get both fuel cut-off switches on, and then we'll come up here, and what we'll do is we'll click on this to start the left engine. So boom, like that, and then we'll go on the external view, and the left engine should be starting to crank, and you can see that it is. I'm just making sure that's not the wind blowing it, because the other one isn't turning very much. So we can see that this thing is cranking up. All kind of default sounds and all that kind of stuff. So it's supposed to be a General Electric 90 or G90, I should say, but they are kind of default sounds on there. I've got the sound turned down a little bit, but you know, it is the default jet engine noises. Works okay, like, you know, it does have an APU sound on it and what have you, but you know, you're not hearing it much because I've got the thing turned down. You can see that there's a bit of smoke animated out of the thing like that. So you can start the engine manually if you want, or if you prefer. So we come around this side, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Control and E. So I'm holding down the Control key and hitting the E key. And what we should see is the other engine start with a bit of luck. Come on, work with me, baby. Yeah, you can see those fans are starting to turn on the starboard engine. So if you're a Control E merchant, then great, it starts off Control E. So we're getting the other engine starting on there. Now when we come back in the cockpit, now you can see that what we've got is this nonsense with 1 and 2 engine, which they are indeed, no engines 1 and 2, but they're both on that side, and you've got 3 and 4 displays there. They really need to change that. That is so sloppy, that. Now, obviously, you've got all these sort of bus tie switches that you can mess around with. Most of these sort of light switches work. The wipers work. This stuff doesn't work, but you know, these switches here do work. The anti-icing does work, you know, so you can put all that on automatic if you want to. Some of this stuff works, you know, for the bleed air and all that kind of stuff if you want to do a proper start and all that kind of stuff. When you get back here, none of that's doing anything, so there aren't any like circuit breakers, and you're not going to be manually aligning the INS or anything like that. It's just not going to happen. None of that stuff there, you know, and, oh dear, the seats don't move up and down like anyone cares. So, you know, there's a good proportion of the overhead there. I'd say a good 75% of the switches on the overhead work. Everything that you'd want to work to tweak things does work, you know what I mean? You can dump fuel and things like that if you want to. You get the general idea. It's functional, but it's not super duper study sim. Yeah. So you got that on there, right? So FMC, just to do that. Now, what I've done is I put a little flight in here from Manchester to Liverpool. So if we look on there, departure, what we're going to do is because I'd set it up, it will use the default flight planner. You can put a route in and it will do it. And I picked the runway 23 right because I didn't want a long taxi. And then I picked an Eclair departure so that we'd be kind of going the right way. And if we look at our route there, we're going to Liverpool there, like that, and we've got the second page of that, so, you know, not a particularly complicated thing, and we're coming off 23 right, so you can see that. And then what we could do is go to performance initialization, blah, 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 cruise altitude 2,500 feet, because we're literally flying 35 miles up the road, so that you can see that. I could put reserves in if I wanted to. Yeah, I don't think we're going to need reserves for something like that, but you can see that I can put them in if I want to. Any changes that I make, I have to hit the little execute button to okay those. So, position, we can put that in there, just so we get our INS working properly. We can put the reference airport in, GGCC, like that, so we've got the right reference in. We could put the gate in if we wanted to. We could set the heading so we can be super duper accurate if we want to, like that. If we go back on the index, we can go to the thrust limits, and you can play around with these if you want to. So it will let you do that. And then if we go to the takeoff one there, I'm going to make sure that we've not got a great deal of fuel in. There you go. You can see I've not got very much fuel in there because I don't want to be landing heavy when we're like that. I'm going to put, so we're only going to need flaps 5 for this, so I'm going to take off with flaps 5, so I'm going to put flaps 5 in there. We've not got much fuel on board, so we're not very heavy. So V1 and V2 and VR should be quite low speeds, but I don't have to calculate them. I can click on this and it's giving me them there. So we've got 157 knots, 168 knots for rotation, and we should be on the sort of the V2 kind of engine out speed at 193 knots because we're very light. Now, because I've done that, I'm going to make sure that I put the flaps down. So you could use that in the cockpit if you wanted to, or you could use your keyboards on there like that. Now I've got all of that sorted. What I should be able to do is I should be able to go to the legs page, and we let's go to progress. Not that I think I'm going to get lost going to Liverpool 35 miles up the road, but we can get that up there. So now what we want to do is we want to push back so that we can taxi out. I already put all the lights on. I know you wouldn't do that in real life. I know you put the strobe lights on when you go to the runway and all that kind of stuff, but I was showing you what they all look like, yeah? So, and I know we wouldn't really start the engines on the stand, but there you go. Right, so here we are. We've got the, so you can see it does animate the slats as well as the flaps, so that's all right. So it looks all right in the air. So what we'll do is we'll hit Shift P just to use the default pushback, because I've got pushback express, but I'm not going to use it for this. It's that's a lot of faffing about, but it adds a bit of realism to it, let's put it that way. Although, as I say, if you enter all that GSX pushback express stuff, it's quite amusing to see the baggage elevator go up and then there not be a door there. So it's a bit, in that respect. There are quite a few things that they could have sorted, and you can, there's not really much of an excuse for that, because you can animate things and have panels work stuff in Microsoft Flight Simulator. We know this, that the Aeroplane Heaven forthcoming Spitfire Mark 1 that's due out in a few days, I think, is going to have removable engine cowlings, so you can see the engines. And anyone who's got any Caronado add-ons knows that they have a little iPad on the steering yoke, and you can click on things and it will show things on the exterior model, like the maneuvering bar and the GPU and all that kind of stuff and what have you. So it's not like they couldn't have done it for this. So I think there's a bit of laziness going on here, and don't get me wrong, 20 quid is not a great deal of money, but at least put a bit of effort in. I'm not being super critical of this in every respect, but those things deserve to be slagged off. This thing could be better than it is with a bit of effort. We know this because even some freeware developers have banged out stuff that's got better features than this thing. So that's pretty poor, really. There you go. It's got some redeeming features too. Not least of which is the fact that it's not that expensive. But you're still paying for it, so it's like, come on, at least do some goddamn work. Because I'm assuming that this is a model that they already had, that they've maybe tweaked up a bit. Because I can't imagine someone would go to the extent of making a super detailed 777 model and then not be asked to make the doors animate opening. It seems a bit beyond credibility, that, right? So I've just hit Shift P to get rid of the pushback truck. And I've got to remember that I've got my rudder pedals plugged in, so we're on Saytech rudder pedals here. So what we'll do is we'll wait for the pushback truck to go out of the way. Now, if it was reality, there'd be someone disconnecting the tow bar and all that kind of stuff, and then they'd be going off to the left-hand side and giving me a salute and showing me the bypass pins and all that kind of stuff. But we'll assume all that's happened. So this thing is not the tightest turning plane in the world. Not terrible, but you might find that you have to get on the brakes because you can see it's doing that sort of that skiddy stuff when you apply too much power. You know, you turn the wheel and it's, you know, going forward rather than turning. So you might require a bit of deft brake application to get this thing turning. But in fairness, you know, I've pushed aircraft off this stand in real life, you know what I mean? And you don't push them to there, you push them back and then turn them so they don't have a tight turn to make. And so, you know, it's a little bit unrealistic in that respect. It's why I use Pushback Express, because you can at least push things to the proper tug release points. But there you go. But yeah, you know, just kind of watch it, because, you know, if you go take this thing to airports that, you know, where there's quite tight turns on the taxiways, you might have to go a little bit slow, otherwise you're going to end up on the grass. So we get this thing round. Come on, you can do it. Yeah, we're going to make it now, aren't we? Easy. Look at that. It's almost like I know what I'm doing. So, well, there we go. I have to say the cockpit, you know, if we disregard the fact that the avionics are from a 747, I think the cockpit actually looks pretty good. It's, you know, it's certainly not terrible. See what I mean about that? You know, you got to get on the turn pretty quickly. I'd be risking getting the main wheels on the grass there. I think I'd maybe just go away with it, but there we go. I mean, it looks well. I'll give it that. You know, it is a nice model, but you know, they have been a bit lazy with it, I think, in terms of animations and things. When we see that, I mean, even that Bredok 3D 737 Max that used a lot of default A320 stuff, at least that has actually got animated opening cargo doors. Now, granted, they open the wrong way, but they do at least open. So, you know, when you can get criticism in a comparison to that Bredok 3D 737 Max, which I think was kind of fun for the money. You know, if you don't know that one, there's a review on my channel. But you know, when you can be criticised in comparison to that, you know, and you're charging $29 for something, it's a bit, you know what I mean? You know, a bit more effort, I think, Captain Sim. I think you can do better than this. Having said all that, yeah. Now I've got the premium deluxe version of Microsoft Flight Simulator. That's the super duper one that's got all the planes in it. So it's got the Boeing 787 in it. But if you've got the default standard edition of Microsoft Flight Simulator, then you won't have a long-range twin like the 787 in your stable. And for 20 quid, which is less than the price difference between the standard version and the premium deluxe, you can have a twin-engine long-range aeroplane that's about the same capability-wise as the 787. The 777-200ER, which this is a replication of, has a range of 7,000 miles. So, you know, if you've not got a long-range twin, you'd end up paying less than you would for the premium deluxe version to get the 787 if you bought this thing. So, you know, that's something to consider if you want a long-range twin and you don't want to spend a lot of money, or at least you don't want to buy the premium deluxe version. Just something to consider. Anyway, right, so here we are on the runway. and let's make sure that we're all good to go for our incredibly short flight to Liverpool up the road. So what we're going to do here is we've definitely got the flap set correctly, and we don't want to be at 10,000 feet. We want to be at 2,500 feet. I'll worry about that in a minute. 200 is good enough for our takeoff speed, but we do want LNAV and VNAV armed because we're going to do that. Yeah, that's all alright. We'll get the flight directors on. Not that we particularly need them. And I'm going to put the plan view on so we can see where we're going. Like that. V-speeds are on there. Takeoff, go around, VNAV, blah, 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 blah. So we could arm the auto throttles, or we could just firewall the throttles. Let's just go for manually throttling it up. Oh, one thing I didn't mention. Those were the blinds on both sides. Here we go. We're over the hump on 24, well, 23. Right, it is now. It was originally runway 24 on Manchester, and we're coming up to V1, and it will announce the V speed. So you hear that? We are, and up we go. That was me with a bit of rudder on there by mistake, not. We were not cleared to take off. We don't care. My airport. I bought it. Right. So, gear, lever. So you can see gear animation is accurate on the thing like that. And we'll come back on the throttle. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to chop the flaps off, and we'll get the autopilot on, and we'll get the auto throttle on like that. And hopefully we'll start turning toward our destination. So pretty low there. That was an entertaining takeoff, wasn't it? Now theoretically, I've done quite a few flights on this thing, and you know it works okay on LNAV and VNAV. It does follow the magenta line and all that kind of stuff. But I've got a bit of a weird one on here. I'm just kind of heading towards Liverpool with my plan being 2,500 feet. So it is a bit of an odd one. I'll give it that. Let's expand that display a bit, shall we, so we can see what we're doing. We'll go on the map. There you go. So it should level off at 2,500 feet with a bit of luck. What I will do is play around with that thing there. Now, it does actually work with Logitech external hardware autopilots, but for the purposes of this review, because you can't see me pressing buttons on that, what I'll do is I'll just use the buttons on the panel here for this. But you can see that thing is merrily following that magenta line, and it is at it's supposed to be 2,500 feet. It's just coming up to it there, you know. So it's pretty close. One thing I have noticed with this is that on the autopilot, it does not like following tight turns. It kind of betrays that 747 origin that it's based on. And what it can sometimes do is it can sometimes climb a bit in turns as well. It normally sorts itself out when it straightens up, but it can find itself climbing 100 feet or so in a really, really tight turn as the power goes on and it tries to rack itself round. Although, I'll be honest, some of that might have been me not having the max bank set to a suitable angle for it. I suspect it's not that, but you know, it could have been, so I'm not going to be too picky about it. Like I say, I've flown 2 flights on this thing today, from Manchester to Paris Charles de Gaulle twice. 1, I did a manual landing. 2, I used the ILS, and it was fine on both of them, and it followed the magenta line perfectly, LNAV and VNAV and what have you. So there's nothing wrong with it in terms of operations, and if you can tolerate the fact that it's got that sort of thing going on, which is, you know, just goddamn lazy, then it's not terrible. But like I say, so if you just bear in mind that what this is this is a 20 quid reskin of the default Boeing 747 to make it look like a 777, but minus the kind of animations that you normally get on the outside of a Captain Sim bird, like, you know, all of the panels opening and stuff like that. That is what it is. Now, whether you want to spend 20 quid on something like that or not is entirely up to you. This review is intended to help you decide whether you want to spend that money. I'm on the fence about it. It's like, it's okay, you know what I mean, but is it really worth 20 quid for that? Well, it depends on how much you want a 777. I quite like the idea of having a 777 with a 7,000 mile range, because I would probably use it in air hauler to fly from my air hauler bases in Africa to Europe, just to kind of sort of like span those continents and stuff like that. So I probably would use it, and I think it's okay. But do I recommend it? Maybe, yeah. Base your opinion on what you've seen here and whether you think that's worth 20 quid. I'm not going to say yay or nay on this, really. I'm going to leave it to you to decide whether you think it's worth it, because it's down to you whether you want to pull the trigger on the thing, really. I think that's ultimately where the thing sits. Now, so here we are, currently flying over the refineries at Liverpool, where if you sort of like turn left, you're heading towards Wales, and if you turn right, you're heading towards Liverpool John Lennon on the other side of the estuary. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to knock off the autopilot. Now notice what I did to knock off the autopilot was I just yanked the stick so that it wasn't doing that, and I'm going to knock off the auto throttle as well, and all of that stuff, so that I am I'm just making sure that I've got control of the throttle there, and it has disengaged it for me, because what I'll do is I'll just bring it in manually. Now then, what are we doing speed wise? Oh, we're alright, we're well within sort of like flat limit speeds. So what I've got is I've got Liverpool John Lennon Airport over on the other side of the estuary, with the runway on 27090. So what I should be able to do is I should be able to just fly here and then do a 180, and I should be pretty well lined up for the runway, rather than worrying about sort of like configuring the ILS. Although, you know, it will, because I've got the flight plan in the CDU, FMC if you prefer to call it that. It will have put, you know, the frequencies in there for it. So let's get a bit of flaps on. What's our speed? Yeah, 220. Yeah, we're all right to get the gear down. Like that, and then I'll get my feet back on the rudder pedal. I'll trim the nose down a little bit, and then we'll do a bit of a 180 and bring the thing back round to Liverpool. Now, of course, you'd never normally fly something like this on such a short flight, but obviously for the purposes of a review, you don't want to sit there watching me flying this thing to Orlando. So, yeah, I've kind of got to do this sort of thing with it, and hopefully we'll be able to see the runway. Yeah, there you go. There's the runway in sight. Like that. So we'll. The flaps coming down. And it. Having to trim it down a lot. It wants to climb. Yeah, it's behaving itself now. But I was having to use a lot of forward elevator to get it to sort of behave itself. It's all right now. That would help if it was the view was sort of straight on, wouldn't it? On the high side here. Well, hopefully we can sort it out. Yeah, still at 1,000 feet. That was some bad aligning, wasn't it? Can we save it? Is that the sound of someone emailing me? Oh God, this is terrible. Can't believe I actually managed to get that lined up then. I think in reality we'd be putting the nose down and giving it some like major reverse thrust. I can't believe I actually got that on the runway from that. That was the worst approach I've ever done in my life. But I suppose what it does tell you is that, you know, like you can get it to do what you want it to do, which is kind of funny. So we get the flaps up. I actually can't believe that I bothered to get that thing down on the runway there. And reasonably centered. It was quite amusing that. It was a tailwind though, wasn't it? Not much of one, but you know, it was still a tailwind. Of course, in reality, you wouldn't have done an approach like that. And you know, if you were even sort of remotely close to what I was doing there, you'd have been going round or dying. You know, but you know, kind of fun all the same. So the question is, do you want a lookalike that is really under the skin a 747? Effectively with the thrust up rated a bit, the weight reduced a bit, and 2 engines pulled off the thing, because that is essentially what it is under the hood. If you look at the config files, most of it is the 747. On the subject of which, the config files, because this installs in the community folder, you can get to all the config files, so there is the possibility that modders will be able to have at this and tweak things, even if Captain Sim don't. So there is that possibility, but you would hope that Captain Sim would at the very least, put some visuals in for the avionics that didn't betray quite so much its sort of 747 port over Origins, because that is sloppy, man. That is half-arsed artwork. It really is, I mean, there isn't really an excuse for that. I'm used for that. For what to, and I'm not a developer by any stretch of the imagination. So that is really, really sloppy, that. And it's a shame because it's a nice model. Looks good. The cabin's great. The cockpit looks pretty good. I mean, and if they just sort of at least tweaked the avionics to look a bit more like a 777's avionics, then I think most people would probably live with it. But yeah, having sort of gauges that have got like for 4 engines on the twin engine airline is ridiculous. I mean, come on, that is ridiculous. So, like I say, I am not going to say, do I recommend it or do I not recommend it? You can decide for yourself whether you think that is too ridiculous for you to consider or whether you'd tolerate it. Anyway, that's your decision. $29.99 in dollars or 20 quid. Available from Captain Sim website. I'll put a link in the description below for this video. You get a couple of sort of like reference things for it. No real manual to speak of. Hardly a surprise there when they can't even be asked changing one of the avionics bits of artwork. And that aircraft configurator. Entirely up to you. Anyway, that's it for this one from Chuck's Hangar. Hope it helps you make a decision on it. Anyway, bye.